But look down this. Tell me that doesn't look awesome. Like something out of Willy Wonka. Okay, so today I'm going to be replacing a wheel seal. It's Saturday, and they need this truck on Monday. So instead of sleeping in and relaxing all day, I'm going to be getting filthy and replacing this wheel seal. Actually, I lied. I did sleep in, but anyhow, you can see it's puking out there pretty good. You know, I've seen them so bad that the whole tire is wet looking. We cut this one somewhat early. I'm going to move the trucks around a little bit so I have easier access to this.
If it's a drive axle wheel seal, you might be able to get up the road a ways before fixing it. You constantly have oil coming in there from your differential. But if it's a steer axle wheel seal, you better get it fixed as soon as possible. Once that little bit of oil is gone, your bearings will burn up, and your tire will go one way, and the truck will go the other way. Hopefully you'll keep it upright. I would give this job a 7 out of 10 for difficulty.
Okay, today I'm going to be doing wheel seal. Inside wheel seal on this truck here is out. I showed you the fluid that I showed you the gear oil running down the tire. There's two ways people do this. Either way, you have to jack the truck up. Kind of the way it takes a little bit more experience, but it's faster, is once it's jacked up, you pull the nuts off of your axle, end of your axle here, and then you can take off your axle nut and the keeper and the bearing and all that, and actually put a little bit of oil on the floor, and then you can slide the duals and the drum out together. That takes a little bit of experience. Once you learn how to do it, it's faster, but you can mess that seal up when you go to put it back in, and it's just, to me, you're risking getting dirt in there. It's just something I really don't like to do. I feel like if you knew how to do that and you're really experienced, it would be the way to do it, but I don't like the risk of contamination putting it back together. So the way we're going to do it, we're just going to jack it up, take the wheels and tires off, then we'll pull the axle out, and we'll just kind of do it that way. Okay, so maybe you have and maybe you haven't ever jacked up a truck before. I'm going to show you some things that will make life easier. First of all, you always want the release knob here to be facing the way that you come under the truck. There's usually an easier way. Usually it's easier to come around the back of the axle or the front of the front axle, just because you have I-beams and stuff. A lot of times you'll have I-beams and stuff connecting the axles that you can't, if you're me, you can't fit your Jimmy John's belly underneath. So anyways, make sure this is pointing towards you. Make sure it's just finger tight. Doesn't have to be tight with the wrench. It should be tight. If you jack it up and the ram starts coming back down, then you would tighten it a little more. Second, if you have an air jack, you want to make sure the air line's on this side of the jack, right here. Otherwise, when you jack it up, it's sitting over here, and then you set it down. A lot of times you'll set the tire on this, and then that's just another step you got to take. You should have to go hook your air back up and do all that. So just make sure it's on this side. I'll show you where I would jack under a truck. I would never, and I mean never, jack on the pumpkin of a semi. If you have a big giant, semi-truck sized floor jack with the jack cup type thing on it, and you have an empty trailer or a semi that doesn't have a trailer on, I would jack right here to jack up both sides. But I would never put a bottle jack right here. Never do this. Never put your jack right in the middle. If it's just a bottle jack, that's just too much weight in one spot. You never want to run this threaded part of the jack all the way out. You never want to be on that last thread. I never want to be. I'd like to have at least 2 or 3 threads down in there.
I know the rule about jack stands. That differential is really big and really wide, and there's just not enough room down here for a jack stand. You can put the pusher axle down for a little bit of added security if you want.
Normally I'll grab the end of the U-bolt right here, and that's plenty because you really just have the bolt and the nut, and then it's straight to here. You can go straight to this bracket here. It's probably safer, but some of the trucks have some goofy stuff going on in here, so I've always just gone right for the end of the U-bolt.
Some say that you can damage the U-bolt threads doing this. I don't know. I've never seen any damage. And any U-bolts that I've ever removed, I've just torched off. So you can use caution when you do this, or look up another way if you prefer.
Always, when you're jacking up, just keep an eye on things. If this starts bucking and banging, stop, but I've never had it happen. I always jack right here. You don't have to jack these up nearly as high as you might think. And in fact, sometimes if you jack them too high, like if you jack them more than like a ½ inch off the ground, the wheels are going to fight you as you're trying to pull them off. It's better to have that tire kind of sitting on the ground, but loose, and then you can kind of dance it back and forth to get it off. But if it's a ½ inch, then the wheel kind of hangs off of the hub a little bit. You can see here that wheel seal, this looks like grease coming out of there. That's how I jack up a truck. Just grab the U-bolt. If you're really worried, you could grab the perch here, that plate, the bottom side of the perch. Whatever you do, don't jack on the center of your pumpkin. Never do that. I know guys do it. I'm sure professionals do it. I don't do it. I think it's horrible. If I had absolutely no other choice, I would go right on the edge here of the pumpkin where it matches up with this. I wouldn't go in the middle of this, the middle of the plate of the bottom of the pumpkin. Okay, I'm going to show you the easiest way to pull off a tire. You see a lot of guys just go pulling it off and then they're fighting it the rest of the time. There's actually a lot easier way to do it. If you can see my foot here, I'm going to put my foot right here under the tire. You can see the tire moving with my foot. I'm going to stick my arm under here, and it's better if you have one of the holes up as high as possible, but you can do it if not. Basically, I'm just going to grab it, and then you lift the tire with your foot and your arm at the same time. It's one motion. It makes it look like you're curling a tire, but really it's all in your foot and your arm, and then you want to go fast. My foot going down right here, and I got my arm right here, and I'm just, like I said, I'm going to, in one motion, curl my foot up and lift the tire at the same time. Just like that. This inner tire, sometimes they get stuck on. Aluminum ones, the wheel's thicker, so you don't have as much play. But this one, for this inside tire here, I'm going to kind of demonstrate on this tire how I would do it. But basically, pretend I'm in there. You just grab it here and here, and then put your foot down here, and then kind of use it to break it free. And then you're just gonna, it'll just kind of walk itself off. But you want to go fast. These hubs here, I don't know when they kind of started tapering in like this. Old truck hubs don't do that.
This first hub is off of a 1994 Peterbilt. This second hub is the newer style that I'm talking about.
And so with this new style, I need a bar. Once I get it off of the studs, I do need a bar to get it up and out of this groove. That's something I didn't need when I was 25 years old, but I definitely need it at 37. So yeah, so just grab the tire like that, and then I'm just pulling straight back with even force on both arms, and then I'll just kind of, if it's getting stuck one way, I'll apply more pressure, and it usually just comes right off. If you go fast enough, sometimes you can skip that gap and get it off. Let's see if I can do it. Yeah, just like that. If not, you just stick the bar under there, and then as you're lifting up, pull out. It takes a little bit of doing. you can see that gear oil. Yeah, it's definitely gear oil. It's starting to work its way around the tire. Okay, next we're going to have to back this brake off. You have to back the brake off. Right now the parking brake is set in the truck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go block the tires. I'm going to release that parking brake. Okay, I got the right side drives chalked. Go ahead and release that parking brake. Because I have a video on slack adjusters. I recommend you watch it if you're going to be doing stuff like this. I'm going to back this completely off because normally if your shoes are saturated, the brake shoes are saturated, you replace them. Normally you can tell if the drum is free. Just grab it back here and just pull on it and see if it moves. I got a little bit of movement there, not a lot. So if that happens to you, just give it a smack somewhere with a sledge. Doesn't even have to be a hard one, just a smack somewhere. And that usually pops the dirt loose. I'm going to go put gloves on. This is where gloves start to play a role. I get it broke free like that. I come down here and I just get under the drum like that and just start pulling it this way. Again, when you get here, it can start to get hung up. Once I get it kind of free of back here, I'll go down and bear hug it and then walk it backwards. Ooh, look at that. It's got that very familiar smell of gear oil. So there you go. She's totally soaked. Totally soaked. This one went out fast. Sometimes they start going out slowly, and sometimes they go out fast. Yeah, this is a mess. Okay, so I'm going to pop the hub off here. Eventually we're going to end up having to take the shoes off and replace those two. But let's pull the axle, and then we'll pull the hub. I think an inch and an eighth. It's a pretty common size on a lot of this stuff. Actually a really big bolt for where it's at now that I think about it. I think most other trucks is like a 15/16 or something. Oh, inch and an eighth right there. She's a beauty. Look at that. She's brand new. You can still see the marking. And look at how sharp that socket must be new. Matco. Only way they haven't bought Matco for a long time. The only way that that's new looking, that must have fallen behind the drawer in the toolbox and was forgot about. It's the only reason it still looks that good shape. I usually use hand tools in a lot of my videos just because it's Saturday. I got started late, so I let you down on that. But I got to kick it in the pants. One thing I'm going to do is clean these threads out here before I get started, because if they start to ball up, the threads in the nut, you'll actually just pull this stud out. And even if you clean it up, sometimes you still pull it out. Just pretty sure that's what this was designed for. It works. Ah, be careful what you touch. I should just pull those shoes off of there so that I'm going to have to anyway. You want to get yourself a bucket of some kind to put down here. Okay. Okay, so older style axles have wedges right here. Just a cone shaped that fits in here. So what you do when you have wedges on there is you want to leave your nuts on, just a couple threads all the way around. And then you take a sledgehammer and you whack it right here in the center of the axle. Whack it, and then get yourself a screwdriver, flathead screwdriver or a pick, and just make sure they're all loose. And if like one's not loose, you can just maybe you could try whacking next to it, but you want to make sure they're all loose, and you can start sliding that axle like that. Sometimes if you just whack it once with a sledgehammer, Then just pull out like this, and then push back in, they'll all come out. Then you can take your nuts off, and then you can take your wedges off. When you pull an axle out, it's pretty easy. Just grab it underneath, just slide it out like that. Just grab it and stand it up somewhere. I don't know if you can see this, but I'm inspecting these splines just to look for any unusual markings or damage. This one actually looks pretty good. Unusual damage, markings, or excessive wear. You can see here, you can still see the machine marks here. And then if you look at it down like this, you can see these lines are all pretty straight. They're all perfectly straight. So that was where you would look for excessive wear. There's a million different ways that they have this on there. And really it's a matter of learning each one. So this one appears to have some sort of a spring, maybe a spring mechanism. Put the socket on, then that pinches these in, and then you can rotate it. That's what it looks like to me. And once you push this down, then the nut will spin in there. I'll get you in here. It's awesome looking. You can see these ears I was talking about. You kind of push down on them. Looks like when the socket's on there, it pushes this tab down, which pulls the little keeper out. But look down this. Just tell me that doesn't look awesome. Like something out of Willy Wonka. You can look in that tube for stuff. Don't belong in there. Shouldn't be anything in there except for oil. Some of these are 8-sided. Some are 6-sided. There's probably a 4.5-sided one. I don't know. Depends on the manufacturer, but you're going to have the right nut. I mean, you used to be able to use a chisel and a hammer, make something work. I suppose, if you had no other choice and you were stuck maybe, but it's really best to have the socket. Usually there. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to wiggle up and down on this and see what, just kind of get an idea of how it felt before I took it off. Got that one there. Okay. I just seen like when I let go how far it goes. Just gives me an idea when it's back together. It's pretty awesome. Grab two, just push down and up real quick. When you do that, it kind of kicks the bearing out a little bit. Okay, as soon as the bearing is coming out, I'm going to look at it right away. That way if I see something really massive or bad on this, there's like pitting or scoring or something like that, or bluing, I can go make sure I have one really quick. It's Saturday, and it's like 3 o'clock, so I don't think I'd be able to get one anyways, but if I was here earlier and I found that the bearing was bad, I'd have time to get into town. So once you're here, you got that bearing off, then you're going to be able to get a lot more movement on this. So just push down and up a couple times, and then pull it. Just came right out. Okay, now I'm going to show you why I set that wheel here with the cardboard in the center. If you start getting oil on your boots, get it off. Don't walk across the shop. It'll make a big mess. Don't wear your favorite jeans to do this. What I'm going to do is just set this. I'm not going to set it down inside the holes. I just set it offset it a little bit. I may end up eventually having to set that down on that hole. So that's your wheel seal right there. Take the shoes off, get them out of the way, clean this up a little bit. I'm going to take the bearing and the nut over to the parts washer. I'm going to pop the seal out. I'll take that bearing over and wash that out too.
They make a wheel seal puller. It kind of fits between the bearing and the seal, and then you hit it on the top with a hammer. I couldn't find ours. I learned this trick here at a gravel company that I worked at. You take self-tapping screws and you put usually one or two and run them down in, and they'll start to walk the seal out. Usually one will walk it out. If not, the second one will walk it out. If not, you can put your crow's foot underneath one of the self-tapping screws and use that to pry it up. But I don't think I've ever had to put more than 2 or 3 self-tapping screws in to walk the seal out. You can see that I kind of smashed the seal in one spot. That way the self-tappers would go straight down and they wouldn't start to walk off to one side or the other. Make sure you inspect this bearing and race also. I took both bearings and the axle nut over to the parts washer and gave them a really good bath. Then I took some of the liquid out of the parts washer, put it in this bucket, and then I came over and gave the axle tube a good scrub down. After I scrubbed everything down with solvent, I came back with a can of brake cleaner and gave everything another bath, including the bearings and the axle nut. I've been harassed in the past for the amount of brake cleaner that I use on a wheel seal, but I do my own laundry and my dryer's not full of gear oil. You want to do a really good job cleaning out the grooves on your ABS ring. You can use compressed air and brake cleaner to help. Finally, I give everything a good shot of compressed air and make sure there's no dust and debris left on anything. I also give everything one last final inspection before I put it back together. I'm really not a fan of this style of wheel seal. You just press it in with your hand. I like the drive-in style ones. They seem to last a lot longer. But the local parts store was out, so I just took what I can get. They are easier to install, but that means they are easier to leak also. So I put a bead of silicone around the outside here. Some of these press-in style wheel seals will start to sweat over time, and they'll create a big buildup in the brake shoes. So I put some silicone on and hopefully that'll help seal it up. Before I install the wheel bearing, I give it a really good gear oil bath. That way it's not dry the first time it starts spinning. It doesn't hurt to put a little gear oil on the race also. I also fill the wheel seal with gear oil, and you want to rub some right where the seal is going to ride on the axle tube. That way it's not dry the first time it starts spinning either. You can push these in with your hand. If you don't want to beat on your hands, you can just use a rubber mallet and tap them in. That's all it takes. If you have this style of wheel seal, you're going to need a seal driver. I'm going to show you a seal driving kit here in a second. But you can also use a 2x4 or a 2x6, but you want to wrap it in an old shirt or a rag. That way you don't get any dust and dirt down in the bearing. With the remaining gear oil on my glove, I go over and I wipe the sill of the axle tube where the wheel seal is going to ride. That way that's not dry either. When you're putting the hub on, you want to keep it as straight and level as possible. The bearing can kind of get hung up in there. You want to push it on and you'll feel the spring in the wheel seal kind of stretch, and you'll feel the wheel seal go on to where it rides. We'll give the outer bearing an oil bath as well. Holding the bearing in one hand, squirt as much gear lube as you can into the hub. I do this in one motion, that way I can get as much gear oil into the hub as possible. Then you just lift the hub up and slip that bearing in, and it should just sit there. You want to inspect the inner tab of the keeper ring. It should be nice and square and not rounded. Keeping everything clean, you're going to have to use the socket to depress the springs and the axle nut. Then spin it on as far as you can by hand. It helps if you keep rotating the hub as you're tightening it to get it as tight as you can by hand. I keep tightening it with this slide breaker bar. You could use a regular breaker bar. You're going to have to torque it initially to 200 foot-pounds. Then you're going to back it off one turn, and then you're going to re-torque it at 50 pounds and back it off a quarter of a turn. If you don't have a torque wrench this big, it's not that much force. I'm putting about 30% of my weight on the end of this wrench for 200 pounds, and then I'm probably putting, I don't know, maybe 10% of my weight on it for 50 pounds. To clarify, I'm talking about the really long torque wrench, not this little wrench. If you use this little wrench, you're going to have to put a lot of weight on it. And for your jam nut, if you have the jam nut style, you're going to want to put a lot of weight on that outside jam nut to get it torqued up. Just make sure it's tight. Grab the hub, lift it up and down, and make sure you don't hear any rocking noise. Then you'll know it's tight. You can also compare the final spin to how it spun initially, but you do want to torque it quite a bit that first time just to seat the wheel seal and everything else. Finally, you want to make sure that the lock tabs come back out on the keeper ring. Just grab the nut with your hand and turn it a little bit and make sure that it can't come off. I worked for a company one time that didn't use axle seals. They went to the hardware store and got clear silicone for about $3 a tube, and they just loaded up the end of that axle before they put it on, and I never saw one of those axles leak. So you can use clear silicone or other silicone in lieu of this axle seal. When reinstalling the axle, it's kind of heavy and it's hard to get the end that goes in to lift up. It wants to kind of sit down in the bottom of the axle tube. So if you grab the flange on the end of the axle and push down as you're pushing in and turning, it's a lot easier to get into the differential. If any of the studs came out with the axle nuts, you can try just sticking them back in. Sometimes when you stick them back in, they'll bottom out and then the nut will tighten up like it's supposed to. If you get to the end and one axle stud is sticking out further than the others, you might have to take it out and put it in a vise and heat it up with a torch. Grab it in the middle with a vise grip and try and work it out. All of these came off like they were supposed to, so I wasn't able to show you. If you're really desperate, you could power wash your brake shoes and put them back on. I don't even know if it's legal. I've never done it. I don't know. I might if I was in a pinch or if it was the apocalypse. But make sure you have a set of shoes. If you have any questions, feel free to message me on here or on Instagram. If you're wondering about part numbers, you want to take your VIN number and call the dealership. If you have a motorhome, you want to figure out who manufactures the chassis and call that dealer. Be sure to wear your most worn out clothes that you have no problems throwing away if you need to. If you're going to perform this job, you can get really filthy. I'm sorry for the audio in this video. Halfway through it, the microphone stopped working. I forgot to charge it. That's my fault. Well, that's it for this one. Thanks for your time.